Vincent, let's talk about Sudan, the crisis in Sudan. It's been a couple months too long. We still see protesters on the streets in Khartoum, protesters everywhere demanding for a peaceful transfer of power since the fall of long-time leader Omar al-Bashir, who's been, I guess, quote-unquote, incarcerated somewhere. We don't know whether he's in prison. But the rumors are out there that he's been locked up somewhere. What do you make of these new developments, especially in light of the fact that more than 30 people have been killed by the military?
The new developments of the military actually saying they're suspending all the deals they've signed with the civilian activists, and now that they're calling for a snap election, for me, they were predictable. They were predictable in the sense that people have to realize that just like a few other countries, Sudan has been a military system. The regime in Sudan for many, many years, the ruling system has been military, and therefore the systems are militarized. Now, when the citizens came up in this revolution, as they say, Bashir was kicked out of town. He was taken out of power. But you have to realize who actually overthrew Omar al-Bashir. Was it the civilians, the citizens, or the military? It was a coup staged by the military guys themselves. Now, as a result, they did not necessarily promise that they are taking themselves out of the equation of running that country. All they did is to take Bashir, who is one of them, out of the equation. And they said they were willing to stretch a hand to the civilian activists and politicians and come up with something that will be palatable to the citizens of Sudan. Problem is, because the system is highly and deeply militarized, the military people are not willing to disengage themselves significantly. Now, the negotiations have hit roadblocks because the civilians in South Sudan, or rather in Sudan, are insisting that they actually want a purely civilian government, or to some degree a configured transitional system or government that has a majority of the civilians. Now, power is sweet. These guys in the military have been entrenched for years, for decades in fact. They're not willing to move an inch. Now, what happens after time? The people, the civilians, realize that they're negotiating with the same guys who are beating them up, who are killing them before Bashir was thrown out of power. Those military guys are acting exactly as you would expect. They want to have the biggest say. They want to have the control that they've been having anyway in that system, but if possible have a token of civilians in the system. And that's the problem.
Going back to the point you made earlier, you talked about how the military establishment has been entrenched in Sudan for a long time, and there's probably nothing much they can do. How about those people who argue that perhaps maybe this is the time that the military can try to accommodate some of these people? They don't have necessarily to go get out of power and maybe hand over power, but at least they can bring in a civilian face who is going to be the face of the revolution to be in charge of the country.
Yeah, they could do that. That is viable, that is tenable only if the military had goodwill. Sometimes you get a sense that there is no goodwill in that whole system. They were kind of tired of Bashir. They themselves, I think they felt they don't need to keep defending Omar al-Bashir. But if they had goodwill, I think there is a place for the military in that system, in that government, but they could easily start a process of demilitarizing the government system of Sudan. They could deliberately do it in as much as it's been a culture, but recognizing that in modern society, militaries are not supposed to be ruling and running a country.
That's a good point, but how they do that? Every institution in Sudan is run by a military guy. Everything revolves around that military dictatorship or military system of government.
But Paul, you have to realize, if you go back down in history, we have had actually military military governments and dictatorships that eventually transitions into purely civilian governments. What you do is to create institutions and a constitution that actually removes the military from executive power, puts it in places where it's supposed to be, which is defense of the country, in the barracks, and you can have some of those strong officials running like ministries of defense, internal security, but you demilitarize the other sectors. I mean, you have the ministries of, for example, national development, the economy, foreign affairs. You can demilitarize those. But this could only work if the continent had a strong continental body. If the African Union was strong enough, they could actually even have suggested of helping create a transitional system where you could bring in not only Sudanese, but even outside experts to help in this interim period to find a way to demilitarize the system before the next election. It is possible.